This is Matt Stone. Just recording a screen video today. It's a rainy day. I'm not outside filming. And I wanted to talk about this topic here. This is a paper that lays out a really interesting theory about vitamin A being, and they call them retinoids throughout the paper, about vitamin A being the cause of asthma. And as a sufferer of asthma off and on for my entire life, and someone who has used a low vitamin A diet to control my asthma, and as someone who every time I eat vitamin A in large quantities, my asthma starts to come back and get worse. And I've repeated that again and again and again, over and over again for 5 years. I feel pretty confident that there's really something to this theory, this hypothesis from this paper from 2001. Now, this paper is 22 years old. I don't think anybody's really followed up on this theory or hypothesis to look into it further. That's why you haven't heard about it. No one has really gone out and tried to disprove this. I don't think anybody's read this except for myself. I read about the theory of vitamin A being potentially one of the central causes of kind of our inflammation and allergy epidemic that the world is experiencing. And going on a low vitamin A diet, I got really great results from that. And that's when I started Googling and found this, right? I'm Googling retinoids and asthma, things like that, to determine if there's a known connection, because I'm experiencing it. Does science know anything about this? So anyway, this is just a short presentation. I'll try to be as succinct as I can possibly be. I want to be efficient so that sufferers of asthma finding this video can get some useful, enough useful information out of this to go and implement a trial for themselves to see if it works for them, right? I'm not trying to prove anything scientifically. I'm not trying to overthrow the medical establishment with this breakthrough discovery. I'm not going for, some big attempt like that. What I would like to do is help other people who have asthma get some relief from it. Because when my asthma was at its worst, I was in a really bad place. I was taking inhalers, which just made it worse after getting short-term relief. That's kind of the thing about inhalers. When you're taking in corticosteroids and things like that, the corticosteroids, glucocorticoids, boom, baby, it's a cure-all until it's not anymore. It works for all kinds of different inflammatory conditions, but it's not something you can rely on forever. And, using it and relying on it for long periods of time has a real negative long-term outcome. So, anyway, nobody was ever really able to help me with, in terms of medication. And I have other things going on too. I've had a lot of allergies. Most of my asthma, the worst trigger of my asthma is definitely pet dander. Horses, cats, dogs, all of it just immediately gives me a huge asthmatic reaction. Interestingly, I can be around dogs and cats all I want if vitamin A is pretty much completely absent out of my diet for an extended period of time, say a couple weeks or more. My lungs get really good, but also I stop having allergic reactions to things. So I think there's something deeper going on here. And I think there's some validity to this. So I'll do my best. It's very sciencey. I will obviously post a link to this in the description so that you can go and attempt to read it for yourself. But it is pretty hard to follow and pretty technical. I will try to sum it up the best that I can. I'm not going to, scroll through this and try to go over it piece by piece. I tried that already, and it took 43 minutes and was kind of tedious. Like I said, I'd rather go through this fairly quickly and just talk about the theory. So here's the theory, right? Vitamin A has all different types of metabolites. There's obviously beta-carotene and all the plant-derived forms of vitamin A. And then there's retinol, the storage form that is found in your liver. There's retinol esters, which is a different type of storage form that you might find in your lungs that's very relevant to the discussion of asthma. And there's retinoic acid, which is a pretty well-known, very highly inflammatory, aggravating form of vitamin A. And So the interesting thing is that this paper asserts that there's high levels of retinal esters in the lungs, and when those retinal esters, when you encounter a trigger, dust, pollen, exercise, pet dander, etc., that triggers the conversion of those retinal esters into retinoic acid, and that triggers a big inflammatory immune response that causes bronchoconstriction and all the symptoms that we know with asthma. So that's what is being discussed in this paper. Now, how did this come to be? How did this go undetected? Well, vitamin A is a vitamin. So there's not a lot of people out there looking for all the negative effects of a vitamin. It's easy for scientists to just kind of file vitamin A away as like an essential vitamin. What's the point of going out and trying to do research on the negative aspects of something that is required? We have to eat it, so if there's a negative to it, well, it's a necessary evil because, we'll die without vitamin A. Well, that's controversial. I wouldn't say that, vitamin A, I don't know. There's a long story, and there's people who are challenging the idea that vitamin A is essential, but it is almost impossible to be vitamin A deficient. And the reason why is because in the modern world here, in the Western world, we're taking in enormous quantities of vitamin A. Something like 65% of the American public is taking a multivitamin that is laced with vitamin A, usually multiple forms. All dairy in the United States, all low-fat dairy, has vitamin A palmitate in it, which is a very highly absorbable form of vitamin A. And it's not just low-fat dairy, it's also plant milks. Almost all of them have supplemental vitamin A added to it as well in the form of vitamin A palmitate. Baby formula, full of vitamin A palmitate. Sunscreens, vitamin A palmitate. Beauty creams, acne cream, all of it's full of vitamin A palmitate. Breakfast cereals are all fortified with vitamin A palmitate. And health-conscious people often take in even more. We're consuming, as health-conscious people, lots of bright-colored fruits and vegetables. We also have fruits and vegetables that are available 365 days a year down at the supermarket. So, those very carotene-rich, it's the bright colors. The carotenes is what give most of the fruits and vegetables their bright colors, the yellows, the oranges, the reds that you see in papayas and mangoes and tomatoes and sweet potatoes and carrots, etc., etc. Most of those colors come from carotenes, and while most people think that you can't get too much vitamin A from plants, in my experience, it makes no difference whatsoever whether you're taking in plant-based vitamin A substances or you're taking in preformed vitamin A from something like egg yolks, butter, things like that. So anyway, let's continue. So we're taking in a lot. And basically, the liver is the storage house, the warehouse for all vitamin A. So your liver just keeps storing it, but it reaches a point where it reaches saturation. And then there's overflow. So it's very easy to overflow a young person's liver because it's very small. The storage capacity is very small. And so things like baby formula that's got vitamin A palmitate and lots of vitamin A rich things. I ate all kinds of fortified breakfast cereal as a kid. And I took lots of vitamins. I used to eat Flintstones vitamins like candy, which is full of vitamin A, and so on. In addition to drinking tons of orange juice and putting, having pasta sauce and pizza and salsa and ketchup, all these tomato-based condiments, which is very high in vitamin A, putting it on everything. That's a typical childhood diet. And the young liver gets overflowed very easily. And interestingly, and this paper does talk about this at one point, it's pretty well known that a lot of people outgrow their allergies and their asthma when they hit, the age of adolescence. They start hitting puberty, Now, this guy in this paper talks about, his kind of hypothesis about it has something to do with the sex hormones coming in. And I think it might have to do with the fact that the liver goes through a big growth spurt from like age 12 to 18. And for me, that's exactly when I magically had a lot of relief and my asthma and allergies were significantly better. And then getting close to age 18 is when I started having more seasonal allergies and I started having really bad exercise-induced asthma. And, before too long, I had severe asthma. I couldn't even walk to the bus stop in the wintertime without, sneezy, wheezy, and coughing up phlegm on the bus after just walking out for 10 minutes. And keep in mind, I was in extremely good physical condition at that time. I was working as a wilderness ranger. I could go out and hike for 15 miles all through the mountains of Colorado and Wyoming, Montana. So I was in extreme physical fitness, and I couldn't even walk on flat ground without having an asthma attack. So kind of a mess. Anyway, continuing on. And then, like I said, as the liver stops growing, then the vitamin A starts piling up in the liver again, and then it starts causing problems when you have overflow. So when your liver can no longer store enough vitamin A, it starts spilling over into the lungs, where it can cause asthma, into the skin, where it can cause eczema and psoriasis. I also have some issues with psoriasis of the ears. And when I was really consuming a lot of vitamin A and having really bad asthma and I didn't know what was causing it, I too, I was having some eczema on the thighs, on the eyelids, in addition to having kind of the psoriasis issue of the ears. So, and I noticed, today, if I eat a lot of vitamin A, which I often do because I have very poor self-control, I get really itchy, inflamed ears along with sneeze attacks and hypersensitivity to things, and then the asthma hits as well. So I've been traveling and eating pizza and stuff like that, and my asthma is a little bit active right now. You can probably hear me kind of working a little hard to breathe as I record this. But anyway, so that's the intake side. We're taking in a lot of vitamin A, but that's not the only side of the equation. The other side of the equation that's talked about in here is the ways that we get rid or expel vitamin A. We also don't do that anymore. So the primary ways that vitamin A is expelled from the body is in response to infection. Something like measles could cause you to dump 70% of your liver stores of vitamin A. And we vaccinate against that and many other things, and we don't get those diseases, and we don't have those things clearing out our livers. We also live in a very hygienic, sterile, sanitary environment in the modern Western world. And so we're not coming into contact with a lot of oral fecal bacteria and stuff like that, which keeps our immune system working and keeps the liver dumping vitamin A and keeping it from piling up. So that's actually known as the hygiene hypothesis, which is discussed in this paper. The hygiene hypothesis is basically the explanation for why people living in the modern Western world in a sanitary environment suffer from all these inflammatory diseases that are very rare in areas where people are still basically living in squalor and not living in a very sanitary fashion at all. So that's all discussed in here. So we're taking in a lot unnaturally, especially from vitamin A palmitate in all kinds of supplements and fortified foods. And then we're not releasing that vitamin A, and it's just piling up in our livers, and then it goes on to pile up in our lungs, our skin. I also believe it's piling up in fat tissue, and that's another huge issue. Interestingly, the scientific name that was given to human adipose tissue, human body fat, it was labeled originally white fat. That was a scientific name it was given, white fat. And if you see, the segment on Oprah or anybody who's bringing out human body fat to display, you'll probably remember that it's this really bright yellow golden color. Well, That's caused from a big overflow of vitamin A. Just like we know, if a cow is eating grass, which is full of carotenes, the butter will be much more yellow, right? The fat of that cow will be much more yellow. If you're feeding chickens more vitamin A in their diet, or letting them forage out naturally instead of eating grain having very low amounts of vitamin A, the eggs, the yolks, will be much, much, much darker in color. That's also caused by the carotenes. But the liver is the greatest store of vitamin A, which is why the greatest dietary source of preformed vitamin A comes from liver. Beef liver, lamb liver, chicken liver, cod liver, etc. So that's the theory. And I have proven this theory for myself again and again. It's a scientific fact that vitamin A is the cause of my asthma. I prove it again and again every week. I have for the last 5 years. Everything that contains any type of vitamin A causes me to have a worsening of my asthma. Any food that doesn't have vitamin A doesn't cause a worsening of my asthma. So it seems to be a very, very direct correlation, and I balance it out. You know, I eat foods with no vitamin A for long periods of time, maybe a week, and then, you know, who could, you know, never eat some yummy foods that contain vitamin A? There's a lot of very tasty foods that contain vitamin A, and inevitably I do eat those foods. And if I eat just a little bit, maybe one day a week, doesn't bother me. If I get too carried away and start eating it every day, every meal, you know, within a week or so, it comes back on me. Also, the theory that infections cause you to dump vitamin A, you would think that that would help my asthma. Well, yeah, every time I get any kind of infection, my asthma goes away. And it goes away for several weeks, which, you know, being a dumbass, I use that opportunity to just eat all kinds of stuff that I'm unable to eat on a regular basis. So I'll often just, I shouldn't just go and refill my liver. But yeah, you know, I do really love dairy foods and, you know, butter and eggs and cheese and tomato sauce, pizza, spaghetti, you name it, and vegetables and fruits. I mean, my favorite drink my whole life has been orange juice, and I can't touch that stuff. I mean, I can every, once a week, but, I wouldn't blow my very limited amount of vitamin A that I can consume. I'm not going to blow all that on orange juice. That's what cheesecake and pizza's for. Anyway, so if you want to try this for yourself and see if you get any relief from it, I think it applies to asthma, it's going to apply to allergies, and it's probably going to apply to skin conditions. How much more it's going to apply to, I don't know. I'm not trying to make any grand assertions about this being a cure-all for everything. I'm trying to stay within my area of expertise, which is asthma and skin conditions and allergies. If you want to try this for yourself, your diet is going to consist of anything that doesn't have color. So you really have to get colorful foods out of your diet. Okay? You can eat some fruits. You can eat apples, but you need to peel the apples. You can eat pears, but you need to peel the pears. You can eat potatoes, white-fleshed potatoes. Be careful of sweet potatoes. Be careful of Yukon Golds, which have a yellow tint. You can eat white-fleshed potatoes if you peel those as well. You can probably get away with eating some bananas. There's a little bit of beta-carotene in bananas, but it's a very small amount. I wouldn't get carried away, but you can eat a little bit. So those are some fruits that you can eat. Grapes, not quite as offensive as other fruits, but I wouldn't overdo it on those either. That's kind of the same category as bananas, I think. You can eat corn, but it's got to be corn products that are white corn. So you can have white cornmeal. You can have stuff that's made with, masa, like white corn tortillas and things like that. That's fine to have. Grits made from white hominy. Again, you need to look for the white color. Don't eat anything that's yellow, orange, or red. And when it comes to green vegetables, the green comes from chlorophyll, and that chlorophyll masks the colors that would be there. So almost all green vegetables have very high levels of vitamin A. So you'll need to avoid those too. I know you're skipping out on a lot of nutritious foods, but surprisingly, doing so might just help you with your asthma, allergies, and skin conditions that you may have. So that's what you're going to eat. You can have stuff like grains, like rice, oats, wheat products, things like that are perfectly fine to eat. You can eat pasta and stuff like that. So there's plenty of foods, like normal foods, that you can eat. Starchy staples and some fruits. There's other vegetables that you can eat too that are white-fleshed, daikon, radish, and turnips that have been peeled, parsnips, things like that. And then in terms of proteins, pretty much all shellfish and fish, all seafood has vitamin A, so that's out. So I really try to stick to skinless chicken. The skin bothers me a little bit, not a lot, but it does bother me some. So there's definitely if there are going to be carotenes, retinoids in the chicken, it's going to be found in the skin, in the fat portion. And so, I do eat skinless chicken. And then egg whites, that's perfectly fine to eat. Just don't eat the yolks. I have a lot of like deli meat, like chickens and turkeys and stuff like that. That's kind of a good, quick, and easy staple. And then beef. You don't want it to be grass-fed beef because it's going to have more vitamin A in it, but any kind of grain-fed beef where the beef has nice white fat on it or no fat at all if it's lean, that seems to be a really great food to have as well. So my protein sources are pretty much, deli meats, beef, chicken that's without skin, and egg whites. And then you can eat sweets, I drink sodas and drink Gatorade, and I eat store-bought cookies that don't have any dairy added to it. I literally eat animal crackers and Oreos and things like that. So, you're not limited. You can still have some things. I sometimes even eat some like candy. So it's not like I have a very strict diet. I can eat a diet that's not a very healthy diet and not have asthma. And I can eat an extremely healthy diet and have terrible asthma. So try to just go into it with an open mind, because you're going to need one to, maybe switch from a healthy diet that you've been trying to eat to what everyone would kind of consider to be a not very nutritious, unhealthy diet. But that might just be what delivers some really good results for you and gives you something to control your asthma and your skin conditions. That's not medication, that's not corticosteroids, it's not something that, is actually undermining your health and giving you kind of short-term relief at the expense of, the quality of your long-term health. So that's all I have to say. Like I said, I don't think anybody's really followed up on this. So if you have some good experiences, report it in the comments of this video. If you try this and give it your best shot, it does absolutely nothing, report that as well. Maybe, this could be a little bit of a forum for people trying this for asthma relief, and we can find out, how effective it is, how often it is effective, and figure out who it's effective for and who it isn't, and, maybe, parse out a little bit of insights from this that don't currently exist. But that's all I have to say about this topic. I hope it's helpful, and I look forward to seeing how it works for people in the comments who stumble across this video. And again, don't forget, the link to this paper is going to be in the description. Go check that out, read it in a little more detail, and you'll see most of the things I discussed in this video are talked about in this paper.